What up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Blacktop Podcast. This is episode 51. We're going to be reviewing the Eastern Conference as well as looking at the little slate of Christmas games that got announced. As you can see, we're two-manning it today. Ruben's got a little under the weather, but we're here. Cousin, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's for those if you're listening or whatever it may be. This is our second time. My computer kind of crapped out on me, but let's get right into it. So before we get into the actual conference, let's talk about these Christmas games. So we'll kind of go two or three at a time. First off, we got the Bucks at Knicks, 76ers at Heat, and the Celtics at the Lakers. When it comes to the Bucks and the Knicks, I feel like, it's been a very good back and forth the past couple of years. I'm excited to see how that goes, considering, you know, Giannis is obviously Giannis, but then you're seeing guys like Jalen Brunson's really begin to emerge as one of the upper echelon guards in the league. So as maybe Julius Randle will be playing well. You never know, but how you feeling about that matchup? Because I assume that's the first game of the day. Because I feel like the New York game's always like early.
With the like time zone, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I would say I don't know who I have taken the game, but usually I find when two teams like that play, it's a very grit and grind. Like those two teams are very defensive minded in general.
for sure.
At least the Knicks are back and forth with being a defensive minded team. So I think it's going to be like maybe low key, like a good game, but also has the potential to flop. Like I
Yeah,
think
I
like
guess I can see that. I think it's the tale of two sides. It's either going to be really good or one team's going to get like clapped and it's going to be over within
yeah,
the first like couple quarters. Heading from there,
yeah,
yeah, the Sixers and the Heat. I think this one's like interesting, giving all like the trade rumors that are surrounding like these two teams. Obviously James Harden supposedly going to be a Clipper, Damian Lillard supposedly going to be a member of the Heat. I think it's just a lot of. I think this is the one that's most up in the air. I think if you keep the Sixers how they are, and the Heat are able to add Dame, this could be like fireworks. Or this could be the game you kind of throwing in the background while you're opening presents or eating your lunch or whatever it may be. You know what I mean?
yeah, I 100% agree. It's like very codependent on like the circumstances that play out in the next weeks, months.
For sure.
I do think the Heat are probably going to be the better team at that point in the year, if I had to guess, though. Like maybe that's a hot take, but I think like unless, the 76ers make a substantial move, which, they will with James Harden leaving, I just think Dame going to the Heat, which is very probable at this point, is probably going to be like the stronger team,
Hmm.
at least from what I think.
For sure. Yeah. Again, I think this one it looks good on paper, but I think you just gotta wait the next couple months to see how it's actually gonna look. Next one, this one I think is this one's the prime one for sure. The Celtics at the Lakers.
You already know who I got.
Yeah.
I got the Celtics winning that game. I don't know. I just think the Lakers in the last, what is it now, 3 seasons have had a very like slow start to the year. And even though their team is starting off probably the best it has in the last 3 years, I just think they're probably going to, knock on wood. I don't wish for any injuries, but I just think they're going to probably have problems still at that point in time. Um, but I do think the Lakers do have a good squad, so I wouldn't count them out. But the Celtics are kind of coming into this season, I think, pretty much primed to like go for the chip.
Oh yeah. I think we'll talk
Yeah,
about it later, but I think this year's definitely chip or bust for sure.
yeah,
But I mean, the game itself, I expect it to be a really good one. This is definitely gonna be one of the prime ones.
100%. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I can't lie. I can see this game coming down to who knows. Maybe it's like the last time the Celtics and the Lakers played, and maybe a little controversial. But I think, given the
that's
fact
true.
how both these teams are retooled, it's for sure looking like a good one. Next one, I think this one's probably, if it's not first, it's the second best game. It's the Mavericks at the Suns, because that's
Mavericks at the
because you
Suns.
got to think about the storylines there. Luka's obviously like the father of this team at the moment, or last year, and then you got Kyrie versus KD, and it's just gonna be a really good offensive game. I feel because you're gonna have the Suns, who are arguably gonna be the best offense when it comes to like you know offensive capability of their players, and the Mavericks. I think if it all works out and everything's like, you know, flowing as it should, maybe you have Derek Lively really coming to his own by then. I think this could be, a really, really good game from the offensive end.
Yeah. I think I said this last episode that we were both on, but I still am not convinced on the Mavericks. I think that was the tail end of the episode, but we'll have to really see where they're at. I mean, they do start strong every season, I would say. That's like definitely a plus side on them, but I think with like I mean, from what I know, I don't really see the squad like being all too much better than how they ended last season, at least right now from my perspective. But maybe that's just me wanting to see more out of Luca, like I
True. I
mentioned.
feel like on
Yeah,
paper, I can definitely see that. But I mean, given that they get a full training camp this time, I think it'll go a little better. But I do think that there's still like the offense has to be like damn near generational, like with say Sacramento last year, for it to really negate any defensive liabilities that their two best players
100%.
have. But yeah, I mean, again, this is probably one of the better games. The last one, this one I think is a similar to the Bucks and the Knicks, where it's hit or miss. The Warriors at Nuggets. I think again you're seeing two generational offensive players. Where then you're thinking about where each team's going to be at that point. The Nuggets obviously are going to have a big question mark about their second unit for this upcoming year, and the Warriors obviously, you don't know how they're going to be looking this year, how everything's going to flow. So I think this one has I think it's a sleeper game, or it's another one of those like you're watching it, Steph's gonna put on a show, but it's not like you're gonna be like glued to the TV as much as like a Celtics or Lakers game would, I feel.
Yeah, I think these are like two of the more veteran age teams in the West, and you kind of just you're not really going to expect like a shootout like the Mavericks and Suns. It's more of like a let's pass the ball around and see who wins the game first
Yeah,
type
I think
game.
that's a good way of wording it for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, overall, I think what was last year's or last Christmas's slate? That one was. Oh, I remember. I remember the last game was like.
I think it was Denver too, wasn't it?
No, I think it might have
No.
been, or maybe. I remember the Golden State and Memphis game vividly because I
Oh,
don't
right.
think like Steph played that game or any of like I think it was like a Jordan Poole game. Let me confirm that real quick.
It was either a Jordan Poole game or it was a Klay Thompson game, I think.
Yeah.
I think Klay Thompson might have torched them, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's when the Dylan Brooks stuff really started. I think if when memory escapes me here. Who
I remember also the Bucks got their ass handed to them on that game against
did the Bucks?
they played pretty sure they played
Did they play the Celtics?
yeah, they did. They got clapped.
Yeah, they did. Right. Oh yeah, by the third quarter is already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
This was a very weird game because yeah, and then also just to give a little recollection on it, Steph didn't play, but Clay and Draymond were obviously there. And then by this point, Wiggins was away from the team already. But just to look at it, Poole had 32. Clay Thompson had 24. DiVincenzo almost had like 20. Draymond had 3, 13, and 13. And then on the Memphis side of things, pretty pedestrian except for Jaw with 36. But yeah, I distinctly remember like Jordan Poole started taking over that game. But anyways,
Yeah.
heading from there, let's talk about the Eastern Conference. I think when it comes to all three of us, this is where a lot of our favorite teams lie. Or in Christian's case, his favorite man crush or player, whichever one you want to call it. But last year's standings, you had the Bucks who finished with 58 wins, the Celtics with 57, Sixers with 54, Cavs with 51, Knicks with 47, Nets with 45. The Hawks finished an even 41 and 41. The Raptors or the Heat had 44 and 38 but finished eighth. The Raptors 41 and 41. Bulls with 40, and from so on and so forth. All those teams, the Pacers, Wizards, Magic, Hornets, and Pistons, all didn't, finish below 500. But anyways, when we look into the potential top six of next year, what you got? Do you have it in order again, like last time?
I actually don't, but
That's
I
okay.
can kind of give
That
you.
means we flipped it because I have an order, but let's hear who your top six is.
I mean, if I were to give you an order off the top of my head, I can. I think I could do it.
Okay.
So here's the thing. It's kind of tough because I think the Miami Heat are like the biggest variable here.
Yeah.
I think I want to say I have Boston finishing number one.
Okay.
Um, I have Milwaukee probably finishing number two again, or well, not again, but finishing number two in the respective spot. Um, this is where I would place Miami if they end up landing Dame. I think I'd place them at the three,
Okay.
and then from there, I want to say I have possibly Cleveland at five, or no, the four. I think I didn't mention a four yet. Philly at five, and then six is kind of a toss up, honestly, just because I think the East is extremely top heavy. I
Mm.
don't think Brooklyn is going to finish six seed this year. Um, just because, if I'm not mistaken, part of the winning structure of that team came from,
Majority
the
of
first
those
half,
wins were
the first
because they
half of the
had KD and
season.
Kyrie.
Yeah, yeah. So if I were to really place someone at the sixth seed, I guess it would either be New York for me, or maybe even, maybe it's a hope, wishful thinking, but I think Atlanta could slide
Okay.
up this year. But I think I have a safer bet on the Knicks. So Boston, Milwaukee, the Heat. Oh no, I put Cleveland at four, Philly at five, and the Knicks at six.
Okay. Not bad.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like we're pretty close. For me, I got the Celtics finishing first because yeah, I agree. I just think they're gonna hit the ground running. Second year coach Missoula, KP is gonna be able to really help on the offensive end. JT is obviously gonna continue to take a step. Jalen Brown, I feel, is not gonna be as relied on this year to really be like an isolation
number two.
scorer, or yeah, or like
Yeah,
because I think him and KP are gonna flip flop between who's like the true number two, which I think is better off
yeah.
for the team. But yeah, so I think they're gonna finish first. Second, I think is the Bucks. Third, I have the Cavs because I just think when you look at the
I I,
problems they
I
needed
see
to
it.
address, yeah, with mainly being the three spot, it's not that they got a guy, but they got guys. I think when you got Georges Niang and Max Strus, that's a pretty solid three tandem because when it comes to like defensively, as much as you'd like a wing stopper as like your three, when you have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley as your front court defensive duo, it can really negate a lot of the things. And Donovan Mitchell's definitely taken an uptick defensively. He's definitely not as much as like a of a cone as he used to be. I think Darius Garland's going to continue to develop. So now you just need your three to kind of be just okay. And I think Struess and Niang are okay. And you also have the upside of a guy like what's his name, Amani Bates. So I think the Cavs are going to be sneaky good this year. I think they're finally going to live up to that potential that they have on paper. Fourth, I have the Heat because yeah, I think last year. I think the only reason they really finished in that eighth spot or wherever they did finish was mainly because of injuries. When you look at like, I think I heard a stat somewhere that they were the team with like the most lineup changes when it came to injury, and it definitely looked like that because I mean, you had Gabe Vincent in and out of that starting lineup. Struess was here and there. Duncan Robinson fell off the face of the earth and then came back in the playoffs. So I think if we're just looking at it inside a vacuum of without injuries, the Heat definitely have that top four potential. Fifth, I have the Knicks. And this one's gonna be like I think controversial because I'm leaving out a prominent team here. I have the Pacers going up at six. So
Oh
I have
man,
this. I have the
Pacers.
Sixers falling on the plan. And that's mainly because, let's talk about it. Because I think the Sixers, whatever return you get on Harden, isn't going to replace that productivity. Because if we're looking at, let's look at say the Clippers. I think your options is what Rocco, Norman Powell, Bones, some kind of combination of that. And not to say that any of those guys are bums, but compared to James Harden and the fact that he's been one of the best point guards of the past few years, past like half a decade or so, a little
No,
concerning. I think Tyrese Maxey can definitely take an uptick, but I think having to, if we're looking at James Harden leaving and now de facto point guard is now Tyrese Maxey, I think you're gonna have a bit of a struggle going from Maxey, who's used to being, more of a scorer, not really too focused on playmaking, to now where he's forced to like be the lead guard. And I think that is probably one of the. I think when it comes to positions of transition from, be it college to the NBA or just overall changing your role in the league, I think point guard and center are like the hardest to transition to. So it's not to say that Tyrese can't do it, but I think that in tandem with losing a James Harden and in tandem of like potentially a Joel Embiid who might become a little disinterested might lead to, I believe, lead them to landing in the play-in. And not to say they're not going to make the playoffs, but again, I just think when you lose a guy like James Harden, it's really hard to replace that productivity. And I think if you don't have a connector that can get the ball to Embiid, that's a big problem.
I can see that for sure. I think it's a pretty valid point now that you bring it up. I just think, I'm far from being the biggest fan of Joel Embiid, but I do think he is like one of the best regular season players in the NBA.
That's true.
I mean, I think that's why he won MVP. Well, because yeah, like the MVP,
Let's be
you
real.
know,
That was a pity MVP. It's
well
not to say
that for
that he
sure.
didn't have a case for it, but
But Jokic could have and definitely should have won
yeah,
it. 100. But I'm just saying, like, I think he does show up in the regular season, and he won a regular season award. I think he's too good of a player to drop that far. But I do agree in a sense that they are going to need to figure out like what their actual solution will be if they do make that trade to the Clippers. But I think there is some upside in like, cleaning up that bench. I mean, if you do have players like Rocco and Norman Powell in your rotation, it's kind of, substantial to at least like winning in the other half of the game where, your starters are off. Like Norman Powell and Rocco off the bench is, probably one of the better benches in the NBA in general. But that's obviously
mhm.
saying a lot with like the productivity of James Harden, like you mentioned. I think you can't replace a player like James Harden no matter what you try to do. But why do you have, I mean, in short, if you can, why do you have the Indiana Pacers going all the way to six out of all the teams in the East here?
Because I just look at their squad. Here, let me bring up their depth chart. But obviously,
I,
you
I
got
mean, yeah,
Tyrese. Tyrese, I
yeah,
think, if it weren't for Tyrese's injury last year, I think there's no doubt they would have been in the playoffs. Not to say they would have finished top six, but I think no doubt they would have been like somewhere in that mix. So here's just like their first 10 guys. So you got
okay.
Tyrese, Benedict Mathurin, Buddy Hield, Jarris Walker, Miles Turner, T.J. McConnell, Andrew Nemhard, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, and whether it's Jalen Smith or Isaiah Jackson, I think when you got, for me personally, I just have a lot of faith in Miles Turner and Jarris Walker being this kind of, really solid defensive force. I think Jarris Walker is a guy who profiles as someone similar to like a Bam Adebayo, to where he can guard 1 through 5. Miles Turner is obviously one of the best rim protectors in the league. Tyrese Halliburton, you know, being the connector, continuing to expand his game. I think seeing him with this World Cup, I'm interested to see what his role is, whether it's more of a playmaker or a scorer. I think either or will help him improve. And when you just look at that second unit, TJ McConnell, not the sexiest of names, but definitely a super solid backup, a super gritty defender. Andrew Nemhard, one of the better steals of last year's draft. You know, obviously a bit of Canadian bias there, but I know he can hoop. Bruce Brown, NBA champion, whether he's running with the first unit or the second unit, I think similar to Tyrese, he's going to be that kind of bridge, that connector between the two units, and I think that's a perfect role for him. Obi Toppin's in a new situation. I personally think Obi would beat out Jarris for the starting role just because, rookie dues or whatever it is. But, Obi is a guy who I don't think has really ever gotten a fair shake in the league. When you look at where he went to, that's the thing I think with guys going to their hometowns, it's really it's very hit or miss. LeBron, even when you think about it, his first stint, you could say it was successful to an extent, but there's a reason he went to Miami. I think when you look at guys that go to their hometown, be it who's a one I'm really think Stephon Marbury when he went to the Knicks, he was cool, but he wasn't like a dog. I think Obi's in that similar vein to where I think just coming out of being number one upperclassman, we already know that's kind of like it's not a terrible thing when you look at guys like Herb Jones, but it definitely it flattens your ceiling a little bit for sure. And I think he never really got a fair shake in New York. And now this fresh start, you know, I think a lot of people have him as an MIP candidate. I'm definitely one of those people. But I'm really just looking at their squad. You're seeing a second year jump from Benedict Mathurin, who was already a guy that was averaging like 20 off the bench as a rookie. And I just think with this in combination with a guy like Rick Carlisle, who's been one of the better coaches in the league, I for sure can see them finishing top six if there's no major injuries.
Okay, pretty good rationale. I think if I had to guess, their ceiling is like around that though. Like
Yeah,
I think
I think
they,
5 or 6.
yeah, like I think they have to like really play out a good season. I do think there may be, I wouldn't say there's any holes in the squad, but I think they're still developing. And I would be interested to see them pairing like a young, like another young star with Tyrese Halliburton. Not to say Miles Turner isn't that, or not to say, Jarris Walker isn't going to become that because, the potential is there. But I think the team is raw,
True.
and I
I
think,
feel like you
and I
got
think
Benedict Mathurin as the guy who's kind of
he
being
could really
ushered
grow
in to
into
be
that.
that second guy. And we know how good
Yeah,
Buddy Hield can be. So
100%.
yeah, I think I agree. They're very raw, but I just think that like when you look at how good they were playing with Tyrese last year and how all that momentum got halted once he went down with his injury, you know,
Yeah,
it's looking good.
I
But
agree.
yeah, I think when
I
you just
agree.
look at the Sixers, it's a mixture of like the return, but also how healthy Embiid's gonna be. You know, if Embiid wins or plays 60 games, they win like 38 to 40 of them or whatever it may be. I'll look at that record without Embiid. So yeah,
Mm.
I think it's definitely a very hot take, but you know, I just think that if you don't have like a point guard or some kind of playmaker that can get the ball to Embiid in the post, it's a the offense is going to be very very cluttered. I feel.
Fair enough.
Hmm.
Fair enough.
You had the Hawks finishing like top six, right? Or was that like you can see it, but
So I think that's just like one of two teams that I could see fishing top
hmm.
six, but I think the New York Knicks are a more, I
I think they're,
guess,
they're more polished, I'd
safe
say.
choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the only reason I have the Hawks is because, to be honest, I just see this team returning to form. Like, I think at this point, Trey Young is kind of, considered overrated around the league.
I think
But
that's
I
kind
just
of
think,
like the narrative of that squad. They
yeah,
have a
and I
year where
think
Trey Young's properly rated. Sorry to cut you off, but
no,
they
no,
have a year where Trey Young's properly rated, you know, or overrated. And then the year after that, where people are really sleeping on them, that's how they get to a conference finals. Or saw this year, you know, they were as mid as a mid team could be. I think there was like, I think I forgot how they worded it, but it's like no team has ever bounced between 500 as much as they did like this year. But yeah, let's talk about
yeah,
the Hawks. I mean, when you look at it on paper, I think it's very promising because you've got obviously two lead guards and you're having a full season, full training camp with Quinn Snyder. It's a lot of upside. I feel. How are you? How do you like? How do you envision the season kind of going for them?
Well, I just think, the John Collins trade, or well, no, it was more of it was a signing, I suppose, right?
No, I think it
Was
was a trade.
no, it was a trade. Oh yeah, 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 okay. But yeah, anyways, I do think that was a tactical move to move on from him, really. I think it wasn't anything less than that. I think they've definitely seen uptick and like promise in Onyeka, and that's why they, I think, chose to go that route. I think they're trying to, and I think it was because in the circumstance that John Collins was in, coming off that like hand injury and basically kind of stinting like his progression on that team, it kind of brought down, I think, the overall morale and promise in the team. With obviously having, in my opinion, not an overrated player in Trey Young, and then also bringing in like another very promising guard in Dejounte Murray. I think being able to have more youth, more speed, and like just more consistency on a squad, and like also to not have any really bad locker room stuff going on,
Mm,
I think really is what held them down last year. Because there was a lot of talks in the earlier parts of the seasons about John Collins, Trey Young, and like that kind of I think carried from 2021 to 2022, and then into like or not 2021 but 2022 to 2023. Um, and then they have a lot of young stars still. I mean, I think the one player that is still a question mark in terms of where his progression is going is DeAndre Hunter. But even that being said, he's still a very serviceable player on that team. AJ Griffin, Bogdanovich is a very good player coming off the bench. They have I didn't even know in their depth chart that they had Patty Mills coming off their bench too. I mean, that's a really good bet in the presence of like a very guard heavy team. Um, and yeah, I mean they got Sadiq Bey too. Just like a lot of I think young promise with players that are already well seasoned. I mean Trey Young, I think will need to come into his own and prove the haters wrong. But I think Trey Young is capable of doing it. I think people forget he was like a league leader in like assists and like points like
true.
simultaneously, if I'm not mistaken. Like he's I think to call Trey Young overrated is like who else you could call almost any player overrated. I think maybe it's because they didn't get it done, but I think that had a lot more to do with just the kind of the team synergy last year more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what happens whenever you have another very ball demanding guard like a DeJounte Murray coming into your office, it gets to where you could have too many cooks. And I think you saw
Yeah,
that first year where, yeah, it didn't really flourish as much as it should have. But I mean, yeah, Trey is undoubtedly one of he's a generational talent, no less. When you look at on paper and kind of the projections and stuff, he's I don't know if he's still, but I remember looking back then, on paper, he's gonna catch Steph. Now I'm not saying he's gonna do that, but
I do remember that.
yeah, we see this whole thing of he's small, he's a small guard who can shoot. So obviously we think he can play off ball, and that wasn't necessarily the case this year. But there's no doubt in my mind that I think Quinn's kind of gonna ask him to work on that. And with the fact he's not really looking to be in the FIBA World Cup, and we haven't really heard much. I think there's no doubt that he's definitely working. I don't doubt it at all. And then when you look at DeJounte, pretty solid extension for a guy that is an all-star level talent, a guy that can get you a triple double any given night. And I think you just got to look to him, I think, to be more of like an Andre Miller. And I know that's really asking a lot from a guy who's really, in the past few years, unlocked his scoring capability. But I would like him to be more of a connector and kind of getting his points in the flow of the offense rather than catching the ball and dribbling 5 or 6 times to get a single shot up. Then when you look at the potential of that team, it's really, I think it's a lot of untapped stuff because Onyeka, as you mentioned, he's a guy that super solid, could be a small ball five, and I think that four position is between Onyeka and Jalen Johnson, who's another guy is very long, lanky, has a lot of good length, a lot of good girth, but
Yo, what?
but I think when you look at this team, we've seen in the past couple years to where their success really stems from having that spacing capability. And when you add a guy like DeJounte, that gets hindered a bit. And not to say they can't be overcome, but yeah, I just think they need this off season, this training camp to really flush out a proper system for them to be as successful as they can be. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, when you look at this whole trajectory or whatever of Trey Young's career, it's the odds would say that this is gonna be a really good year for them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you put it perfectly at the end there. Just like I think they just really need to figure out more of the systematic issues than the players
Hmm.
themselves. I think if they could pretty much figure out a system for this team that is successful, this team I think has the ceiling of like any other Eastern Conference team, maybe besides, the top two. I think they have a ceiling of being a 3 seed, but that's like saying a lot
Yeah, that's like if
needs to
everything goes
happen.
perfect, if Trey's playing at an
Yeah.
MVP level. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's why 6 is a rational spot because I think they will figure out a lot, but obviously they need if they want to be at the 3, you'd have to consider them being better than Cleveland and being better than, even though Sixers won't maybe be there, they have to be better than the Sixers and better
yeah,
than Miami. But yeah, I see that. I see that for sure.
for sure. Let's talk about the Nets because I think they have that build of a team that doesn't have a super duper star, but it's got a bunch of kind of mini stars in that sense. You got a Cam Johnson, you got a Mikal Bridges, you got a Spencer Dinwiddie, a Nicholas Claxton. And you look at their draft. I think they had a very stellar draft. Noah Clowney is a guy I think could pair very well against or along with a guy like Nicholas Claxton. Dariq Whitehead, you know, if a guy's from Duke, a lot of the time they can be a dog. Not all the time, but a lot of the time I feel. And then even like a guy like Cam Thomas, who's I think really, I hope cements himself as like a six man this year. I think that team has a chance to. I definitely don't think they'll make top six for sure, but I think there's an avenue for them to make like some noise in the play in. I think, but I think overall they're definitely gonna be one of I think a fun team to watch. How are you feeling about the Nets this upcoming season?
I think they're like a less figured out version of what the Pacers are, honestly. Like
Okay.
just a lot of like rawness, like pause in terms of just like the player selection that they have. Like, I mean, Mikal Bridges, I think, is really going to come into his own this year. I do have him under my list of breakout players, which maybe would be a good transition into that after this.
Yeah.
But I think I have like maybe 4 players on my breakout players in this conference that are from this team. And I think it's because someone, not even someone, I think at least 2 or 3 players from this team are going to step up this year. And I think it's because there's finally a full absence and a full like training camp without KD, without Kyrie, without James Harden, even though he left last season. Um, and I think it's a lot to say because I've said this even last year, and I was fucking wrong. But I still believe in Ben Simmons. I
Oh,
honestly do.
hey, I mean, we've seen the video of this year, whatever it is, and I think not to hijack your point, but just quickly go over it. If he plays like that kind of Draymond role, I think they can have a solid offense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Ben Simmons, like the thing is he's not far off from being that player he was before.
Hmm.
I think it's just figuring out where he belongs and how he's going to like be that impact. Because I mean, he's been a like generational level player, and that was only 3 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can just return to that, but I think someone just needs to unlock it in him. And if it's going to be anything, it's going to be a team full of people that are in a sense like minded and no not too star heavy, like you're not going to expect like a Mikal Bridges to take away the shine from like a player like Ben Simmons, like if that's really like the best player on your team, right? So if it's going to be a situation for him to actually like recover and return to the player he could be, or at least like a fraction of it, I think this is the right squad for him to be a part of. But um, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
could say more about that, but I do think that's like, that's my optimistic thinking on Ben Simmons for the
Yeah.
day.
Here's a hot take, man. There's a world where Ben Simmons is the best player on this team. I'm not gonna lie. If he's
Oh,
able to
for
kind of
sure.
go back to like 2018, 19 Ben, whatever it is, where he was looked at to be similar to the vein of a Giannis or even like a young LeBron, whatever it may be. I think it's there's a lot of upside there for sure. But I just think the thing with them is that the spacing is always going to be an issue. I think when you look at that, the only real like plus shooters on that team is McCall, Cam, Spence. Uh, Cam Thomas can to an extent stretch the floor, but he's very much a more in between midi kind of guy. So I think
Right.
figuring that out. But Ben Simmons, he's definitely. I think this is the last year where like he kind of
Yeah.
has the
Yeah.
opportunity to regain that kind of form. But I don't know, man. He's turning into one of the bigger what ifs at this point. I think because when you look at what he was coming out and now what it's come to, I think it's interesting. I'm excited, but yeah, I think if I had to put my stock into a team based on how fun they are, I think a good portion of that's going to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
as you
agree.
mentioned, I think that's the perfect segue to like breakout players. So let's just rifle them off, and if you got a little extra to add, go ahead.
All right.
One by one.
Yeah. I mean, we can rifle them off, and then if we want to talk about anyone, we can just pause.
Hmm?
I'll say my list, and you let me know what you think. Maybe like a general consensus. So I don't know. The definition of breakout players is like it's tough because there's like different ways of going about it. There's players
Yeah,
that go
I
from
think it's
like
very
you know
subjective.
yeah, like the way I see it, there's two versions of breaking out. It's like not having any minutes to turning into like a very substantial player that comes into the rotation 20 to 25 minutes and starts putting up real averages,
Hmm?
or even, starts to become a starter, which is a rare case, but happens. Or there's players that, go from being a 25 to 30-minute player to being like that guy on a team or being like one of the guys on the team, like how what's his name? Austin Reeves came into the Lakers last year, right? Like that was kind of an example of that. So I mean, this is my list is kind of a mix of that, but it's all players that I think have already shown a lot. I mean, I think the first player I have on this list, which I think would be on anyone's list really, is Mikal Bridges. I'm not really going to go too much into that, but we already saw what happened at the end of the season. I do have Cam Thomas on my list. Um, I have LaMelo Ball for other reasons, kind of going back to the explanation of going from there to there. Um, I mean, I have Tyrese Maxey, and I think when you mentioned the point about Philadelphia, I think there's it's two different scenarios. Like he could just kind of stay the place he is, but I think I've heard just in the media I've consumed Tyrese Maxey's name is thrown around a lot in terms of potential. Um, I think he's definitely maybe got one of the higher ceilings in the NBA right now in terms of like player potential. Um, I have Dennis Schroeder on this list, and I think it's
Ooh,
because
okay. Let's talk about it. Cause
uh,
Riv is nice. We didn't even talk about the Raptors, but let's do it.
and fuck the Raptors, respectfully. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, this is going to be a team where it's very possible Dennis Schroeder could become a starter. I think that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think if
Um,
Scotty's not shaping up to be like a fully ready point forward, I think Dennis will. Even then, I think Dennis is going to garner a lot of minutes.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't even really have like crazy rationale for this. Like you could say a lot of the numbers to back it up, but I think Dennis Schroeder has just come to a point where he is like instant offense, and I think being like able to actually garner like a very possible 30 to 35 minutes like consistently on a team that is, at a point of like possibly retooling and like basically rebuilding almost at this point, almost the half rebuild point. I do see Dennis Schroeder kind of being a benefactor to all those things, right?
Mm.
Um, that being said, I think there's a lot of mouths to feed on this team still, but Dennis Schroeder, I think, knows how to get his own. And I think this is one of the first circumstances for him in a while where he actually isn't playing around, like a LeBron James, an Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum, a whoever, right? So yeah, I think that's why I see him having like a breakout season, but just in the sense of Dennis Schroeder,
Yeah, I think just kind
like
of regaining
yeah,
form for sure. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, when you
yeah,
look at that squad, the fact that they lost Fred and their main playmaker, You have Scotty, who's like he's definitely shown strides of it, but this sophomore slump kind of, and not even really a slump. He just didn't like take an uptick. But I think when you look at that squad, somebody's got to swing the ball to Dick. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. That's what
Swing
I'm
the
saying.
balls. But yeah, I think Schroeder is definitely a guy who can do that. And not only that, I think he's a guy that if I'm Grady Dick and I'm looking at a way I could expand my game, he's a guy I'm going to for sure. I mean, Grady, we all
100%.
know is like an elite shot maker. You know, and we've seen the shots he's been able to make at Kansas. It's nutty. But when you look at Dennis Schroeder, it's a guy who has the ability to like stretch the floor at times, but more or less is kind of an in between guy. And I think Grady, the fact that well, Grady's obviously taller, but the build is similar. I think he's a
Mm,
guy that I'd probably talk to if I'm Grady. But I agree. I think there's something brewing there for sure. And another one
yeah,
you or a guy you mentioned earlier, what Cam Thomas, yeah. Like we mentioned before.
Cam Thomas.
I want Cam to be a six man of the year kind of guy. And I think he's definitely in that mold for sure.
Yeah, I think like you just see how strong of an offensive player he could be, and I'm not saying like he could really be that type of player in the in the association, like in terms of like being that 25 point per game player, but he's shown real glimpses of it, and I think like he would be like a very promising six man like on this squad
Hmm.
specifically. But I could honestly see him developing it even further than that. It's just, the circumstance of being on a very young team, very raw team.
Yeah, I think that and
I
there were just a lot of mouths to feed last year because when you look at that
exactly.
squad, in the second unit, you had guys like Patty Mills, Joe Harris, not Dell, Seth Curry. So I think kind of scaling the squad back a bit is given is going to give Cam some kind of opportunity. And not only that, I think there's going to be a bit of healthy competition too. When you look at the rookies who are coming in, I don't expect any of them to really start outside of maybe Noah Clowney being able to like carve out a role. But there's a lot
Mm,
of fresh meat there, and I think Cam's going to have to rise to the occasion. And I think he will.
yeah, yeah. In terms of other players I have really quickly on my list, I'll just list them off. I do have OG on there. I do have Jordan Poole, for obvious reasons. I have Kyle Kuzma on that list too.
Mm.
I have Franz Wagner. Franz Wagner, I think, is going to come into his own.
Yeah, fine.
I
Let's talk about Franz before. I'm not gonna lie, man. Yeah, Franz is a guy I'm like extremely high on. I think he's gonna be looked back as probably when you redraft that draft. Even then, whilst I'm talking, because I think Franz is gonna. He's a guy I can see. We saw how Laurie came back from the Euro League, from the Euro Cup or whatever it's called this past or last year. How that he turned into that. Now I'm not saying Franz is gonna go to like a 25 point per game scorer because obviously there's too many guys there, but I do think this is the year where he goes up to, 21, 22, 21, 22, 5 and 3 kind of guy. And when you look at his averages, I don't want to throw 50, 40, 90 because that's elite company, but he's not too far off of being in the midst of those kind of guys. And when you look at his continued shot making ability, his ability to create, he's number one. He's I think the perfect number two to a guy like Paulo. And I think if those two are able to continue to generate some sort of bond or whatever it may be, I'm excited for that. But I mean, just looking back at this 2021 draft, there's at least three guys that I'd for sure take before him that went before him. Because okay, let's go through this real quick. If you had to pick, thinking of everything, whether it's upside or whatever, if you're taking Franz or this guy, okay, would you take Cade or Franz?
That's tough. I think,
Right? It's not so black and white. Like, not to sway you anyway, but I think you definitely take Cade.
yeah,
But Franz, I think, isn't
but
too
it's
far
not an
behind.
easy choice. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not an easy choice
yeah.
to take Cade.
Jalen Green,
Who else? I think take Franz at this point.
you don't want that extra thrust from Jalen
I
Green.
don't. I don't. I don't want that step back three that gets blocked every fucking.
Evan Mobley. I think you take Evan Mobley pretty comfortably.
I think I took Evan Mobley.
Yeah,
I took Evan Mobley
yeah.
there.
Scotty Barnes.
I do. I think I take. I think I take. Oh man, I don't know. That's tough. Two very different builds.
Hmm.
I think I take Franz maybe just based on the second season,
True, true, true.
but that's like a choice that could bite you in the ass.
Yeah. His
Yeah,
teammate Jalen Suggs. I'm not gonna lie. Jalen Suggs, I remember like, whoa, this guy could be like the next big thing, but obviously a bit of a bum. Moving on from there,
no,
Josh Giddey.
man, this is a good draft class. I didn't even realize.
Right?
Um, I do take Franz over Josh Giddey.
Hmm. Cum bucket.
Uh, Franz for sure.
So there's like three, four guys there that you take over Franz easily. Not to say he was
No,
like a crazy
100%.
steal at 8, but I mean when you look at the quality of this draft, man, Franz is for sure one of them guys, no doubt.
Yeah.
Any other guys you
Um,
got on there? Jordan Poole, I have a question later we can use to kind of throw him into it, but yeah, I agree. Like, what do you think he averages this year?
I think he honestly averages a comfortable 22 points per game. And that's
Yeah.
that's like in my opinion floor. I think that's floor. Like I
What do
think
you think
he's
is his
gonna be fine.
upside?
I think his
Can it
upside
be a
is
Bradley
like,
Beal kind of 30?
well, that's the thing. He's playing on a team full of like, who the fuck are those people? Like, okay, no, that's not true. That's really shady to the Washington Wizards. But let's be real. They're not. He's not playing with any like I think real talent beside him. Besides, okay, let me pull up this really quick. Not to, I mean, he's got obviously very serviceable like role players at this point, and a lot of young talent, but no one that's going to like really outshine like how much usage he's going to get. Besides Kyle Kuzma, Daniel Gafford will probably be like maybe the comfortable fourth, third option. Like Jordan Poole, I think could get an uptick, like have a crazy uptick this year. Like he's a good fantasy pick this year, and I wouldn't say that
True.
last year.
True. I'm not gonna lie. I would say comfortably. Actually, maybe not comfortably. Fuck it, I'll say he's gonna average like 25 or something this year.
He
It's gonna
definitely
be like
could.
on
Like
god awful efficiency. Like I could see him shooting something like 43, 33, but it still have like a cool 85 to 90% from the line.
yeah, and I mean the logic really there is that like he was, coming off the bench on a Golden State Warriors team and already averaging. Was he averaging over 20? He probably was.
No, I
Maybe he
don't think
was
he
right,
ever got
or
to
maybe he was at
20.
18,
Yeah, like
18,
a
17,
16,
maybe. Yeah, okay.
17. Yeah.
Yeah. But like he obviously had a lot of huge games and he didn't even get that full usage. And now he's the number one option on the team. So yeah, I think it's gonna be on some like 41% like 33% from
Yeah.
three. Like it's gonna be disgusting, but he's gonna average 25. Like I don't have any doubt about it.
So at that point,
Um
is he a good fantasy pick?
I mean if you're not playing a lot of
If
if you
you're
are
not
playing
playing nine
percentages,
cat,
then
I think he's got high
yeah, he's
upside,
nice.
but he's gonna
Yeah,
sewer you if you're playing categories like a real
yeah.
man. Anyways, who
No.
else you got on your list?
My last four are like they're conversational in a sense, but I still got RJ Barrett on my list. I believe in RJ
Come on, man.
more than most.
I love RJ, but he's nothing more than like I think his ceiling, genuinely, is like what Mikal Bridges was on the Suns.
Nah, bruh. I believe in RJ Barrett. I still believe in RJ Barrett. Um,
I think
I
FIBA
think
will
this
be
was
a
like
good
more
indicator of like where he's at this point.
fair enough. I have Jalen Duren on the list. I think he's one of
Mm-hmm.
my favorite
Yeah.
players coming from Detroit. I do have Cam Johnson on the list. I think he's just carving out a bigger role in this team. And I do have Nick Claxton as well, just because it's like kind of the evolution we saw in him last year, and how much more that's gonna. It's kind of the same story, just going to be able to evolve more with the absence of KD. But yeah, that's my list. What's yours?
Let's talk about Jalen Duren first.
You want to talk about Jalen Duren?
Man,
All right.
I'm looking for him to really solidify himself as like the number one like center on that squad because he's got gonna have to beat out guys like James Wiseman, obviously, Isaiah Stewart, Marvin Bagley the third or second, whichever it is. But I mean, Jalen during the summer league, he was kind of getting in his bag. The summer league
Yeah,
and the select team, I think he's showing that he's a guy that will continue to work on his game. And when you look at how young he was when he was drafted, I think he might have been 18 when he got drafted because of late birthday or something like that. And look at how young he
yeah,
is, because man, he I think is kind of he's another guy that's in that sort of bam, not a 7 footer, but has the jumping ability and the versatility to be one of those like elite defenders. And I think when you look at him and his continued like expansion within this range and improvement overall, I think he's a guy that I think could be a guaranteed for sure like double double, no doubt, this upcoming season.
yeah. I personally think he's going to. Um, I think he's going to dethrone all the centers on this team and become the starting center by some point in the season. I mean, yeah, his summer league like performances have been insane. Like I'm just reading these like stat logs again, but like 18 rebounds in a game, 23 and 10, like 20 and 14. Like those are like numbers that, even though it is a summer league showing, like he's definitely, I think, got the most offensive potential out of all the centers on that team. I think Isaiah Stewart has already kind of showed what he's about. Um, no offense to James Wiseman and Marvin Bagley the third, but they have a lot to prove if they really were going to take over that role. And I think Jalen Duren is just like who you would actually want to build around Cade, if that's like the avenue you're going, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure. I mean, when you look
yeah.
at like what he was able to do as a rookie, pretty insane stuff. Because I mean, he had a 30 and 17 game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't able to crack like a 2020, but I think when you just look at like his ability to rebound, and I'm also looking at it, it's a lot of offensive rebounds as well. I think that's what I really like about him. But I mean, man, if I'm looking at Jalen Duren, if there's like a center, like a young center, I'd build my team around. He's in the top part of that list. And if you're looking at just young guys, not overall.
No, of course. Yeah. I definitely agree. I don't think he has any real flaws to his game as far as being like, you know, a kind of 2023 era center player.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think if he's just
didn't word that
able
exactly,
to,
but
maybe be like a Brooke Lopez, where actually maybe a mix of like Nets Brooke and current Brooke, where he's able to stretch the floor, but he's not completely reliant on that. I think that could be
yeah,
like obviously his big next step. But yeah, I mean, any other guys, or was that your list?
that was my list. That was my list.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, I think only guy I really have to add, or guys I have to add, is Obi Toppin, who we kind of touched on. I think new situation with an actual opportunity. I expect him to be a super solid guy, and I think him in tandem with getting lobs from a guy like Tyrese, I think could really help restore his confidence for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think he has had a lot of, you know, or maybe a lack thereof of opportunity to just really flourish into the player I think he was meant to be.
Yeah.
I mean, he was yeah, I think he's really shown a lot of spurts of it, and I think it's time for him to actually
Yeah.
turn into that player.
And that's not to say he was ever like never given a shot. I just think it got to the point where it wasn't consistent.
Yeah,
15 minutes there, 5 here kind of thing. Another guy, a couple
exactly.
guys I got, especially with the departure of what's his name, John Collins. I think is AJ Griffin and Jalen Johnson. AJ Griffin, obviously, the floor spacing capability when you have two ball dominant guards in Trey Young and DeJounte Murray. Him and Sadiq Bey, I think, are really going to be able to help spread the floor very well. Jalen Johnson, he's a guy that's in a similar build to John Collins, and he was super solid when he had the opportunity. And now that I think it'll be a bit more consistent, he's a guy I look at to be Another one of these wiry, long guys, a lot of girth and able to really make their impact felt, you know.
Hell yeah.
Undies. Any other
I
guys you got? You can think off the top of your head?
No, not in the Eastern Conference. I think the Western Conference this was definitely a bit different, but yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in the Eastern Conference. I think mentioning before that this conference, I think compared to the West, is a lot more top heavy,
Yeah,
and so there's a lot of teams with like very deep young cores. So
for sure.
I think, yeah, I think you could mention a lot of young players, but I think the people I mentioned are kind of my standouts. If
Yeah,
anything,
let's just as a little curveball. Let's build like a starting five of breakout players for the Eastern Conference. Who would you put
based
at
on
your
our
point?
list,
Or whoever comes to your mind at this point. Who would you have at the point? Felix Petty, obviously Jordan Poole, personally.
not including Jordan Poole,
No, it could
or
be
I
whoever.
can't.
So I think Jordan
Oh well,
Poole's
it's
for
got
sure our one.
Jordan Poole's the one. I think if you can slide,
I think McCall
I don't know.
classifies as a two
Yeah, he's a 2-3. I could put McCall in the two for
because
sure.
I feel like our three has to be Franz
Three's got to be
for
Franz.
sure.
Four, I think, could be based on my list. I think it could be Kuz.
Or Obi maybe between those two.
Obi. Okay. Let's put Obi. I think that's a
Okay.
more creative choice.
And then our
And then
center,
Jalen Duran.
yeah. So we're looking at it real quick, just to kind of put a nice little bow on this section. Our all most improved breakout first team in the East or whatever you want to call it. Got Jordan Poole at our one. We got Mikal Bridges at our two. Franz Wagner at our three. Obi as our four. And Jalen Duran as our five. I think it's going to be exciting to see how those guys continue to shape up. Moving on to here, we got a lot of good rookies coming into the Eastern Conference. Let's talk about it. Brandon Miller, how are you feeling about him?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think I think with the Eastern Conference, like, and the rookies in general, I'm still very undecided on how I feel. I think Brandon Miller, like, for a lot of reasons, was taken up two, but the way I've still been seeing it is just like I think he was the choice. I don't know how this is described. I remember you guys mentioning, but he was the positional choice,
Yeah,
if I'm
he
not
was more of
mistaken,
a
right?
fit than BPA.
And this it kind of reminds me a lot of what happened last year with uh it's escaping me the Rockets choice from last year, Jabari Smith. Um, I think even though he wasn't the most positional choice, um, I think I just feel the same vibration from this pick as well, where maybe it will bite them a lot because Scoot is going to turn into that guy, and they're going to be like, "Man, we chose Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson." But that is just maybe me feeling that sort of sense from that. I don't think I have a lot of you know like concreteness to back it up because I think rookies are always the most unpredictable coming into the league. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like he got a shit deal because I think he could be as great as he can if he's in that similar vein of the Paul George where it takes a few years for him to develop versus guys like Scoot who's probably going to hit the ground running. Then obviously he's not going to be looked at in like a super positive light within the draft class, but overall, I think it was the right pick because you could say this whole you have two great players, you make it work, but we saw with the Hawks to where two ball dominant guys doesn't necessarily translate fully well. Granted, Lamelo's a way better shooter than I think personally than Trey or Dejounte, but I think the sentiment remains, and I think Brandon Miller he's gonna have a disappointing rookie season based on the expectations of being picked before Scoot. But I think
Yeah,
overall it's gonna be decent. I think he's gonna get a lot of shots, and he's gonna have a lot of opportunity for sure.
yeah, I see it the same way
Yeah.
basically.
Osar Thompson, how are you feeling about him? First of all, if I remember we were talking about like if you look at like the top five of every draft, there's always one bust or whatever it is. He's a guy I think could be it, but I think it could be more because of fit than actual skill.
Yeah, I think falling into a Detroit team at this given point, it's kind of tough to like carve out your role.
Yeah, especially if you're
Um,
not like an effective shooter like he is.
right. Like I do think it is tough just because I think with any rookie being drafted to a team like the Pistons, I think they're in a situation where like they can definitely fit him into the team, but then it's just like slow. It's very slow because I think, you have a year three player like Cade that's going to need the most attention from you because that's who you can build around right now. And then you had a player like Jalen Duren last year and Jay and Ivy who are now coming into their second year. Like I think it's with these young teams that like keep drafting new players because I could say the same thing about the Rockets drafting like Cam Whitmore and like Amen too. Like they might not really get, the circumstance that they want from being on these young teams that they expect. Like if they were drafted 3 years ago and, there's no one on this team yet, then that's a different story. But yeah, I think he's a great player, but I kind of agree that he's not going to get a lot of burn or the burn that he maybe expects.
Hmm. I mean, personally,
Yeah.
I probably would have went Cam Whitmore here, but you know, it is what it is. I think it's not to say that he can't be a good player, but I just think his mold is kind of like a bigger Jaden Ivey in a sense.
Mm.
But we'll see what happens. Anthony Black, how you feeling about him? I think he's like a supreme connector, and when you look at like what the Magic really need, I think it's always been that because I think Markel, when the team's playing with Markel, they look really good. But then obviously with like his spell of health or whatever it may be, uh, you haven't really been able to see that as like a consistent part of their offense. But getting a guy like Anthony Black into there, I think that could really help, especially with the size he possesses. 6'7" point guard, pretty good.
Mm. They have him listed as 6'5", but I could, I'm guessing it's 6'7" with shoes or something like
It
that.
might, yeah, maybe
But
that or the hair. Maybe it's like
yeah,
6'7" when he measured at, but I know like when they measure guys, they go through the hair.
yeah, right. But no, that being said, I mean, this is a team that's like, in my opinion, pretty guard heavy, but also not really like, no one really possesses the role of like the guard on that team yet.
Yeah, good
So
point.
I think it's I think at the same time it's just gonna be like a dogfight to see if he like can really cement that. And I think it'll be about him playing through Franz and playing through Paolo, like being able
Yeah,
to,
being able to set
show
them
that.
up.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is, yeah, there's just like so many guards on that team that no one's really like the guard. Like I wouldn't if you say the Orlando Magic and you mention like, oh, who's the guard on that team? Like I wouldn't give you a name.
Yeah, like in
But
my opinion, I feel personally the only like solidified guys that are like almost untouchable in a sense, I think it's really only Franz and Paulo. I think
100%.
Wendell's cool, but if you have the opportunity
Wendell
to
is cool.
upgrade from Wendell, you would upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So I think it is a good pick in a sense. And I think, you'll have to see if he can really become that player. But I think they've done that a lot. The Orlando Magic guard experiment, I think, is still continuing until further notice.
Yeah, for sure. And while
Yeah.
we're on the topic of the Magic, Jet Howard, here's my theory. I think the best second generation NBA players are the ones who come from dads who are like solid, but not like the cream of the crop. Because, when you think about it,
Del Curry.
Del Curry, solid. Steph and Seth, I think, have superseded him. Seth, I think, is maybe like similar lane. Uh, John Stockton. Do you even know who John Stockton's son is?
His son?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah. David Stockton. He's in the G League. Who else? Patrick Ewing's son. I think he maybe played a game, but he's obviously
Nope.
Buns. we've obviously got. We'll see how LeBron. We'll see how Bronny and Bryce like do with that whole logic. But yeah, again, not to say to say Jet Howard's gonna be a dog, but Jawan was solid for sure, but he wasn't like cream top of the line as much as Jet is. And I think Jet, as much as like a reach he was, he fills their need in terms of floor spacers. So I think it's gonna be. I gotta look at what their like lineups really looking like, but when it comes to like that three spot, I feel that's kind of actually that's probably more obviously bronze. But when you look at the two, oh yeah, I think Jet could maybe get into that two spot. Like a starting lineup
Oh
of either whether it's Markel or Anthony Black, Jet, Franz, Paulo, Wendell. Not bad at all. Not bad at
no.
all.
And not to go too off topic, but I think your logic of like somewhat mid but serviceable players having like sons is a pretty good logic. Because I think
Right?
if you've seen Carlos Boozer's son and like his trajectory, he's a dog. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna go he's about to go number one in a
True.
few
Boozer was
years.
like a dog for sure, but he's not like in the vein of like, John Stockton, Patrick Ewing. Think about Michael Jordan's
No,
sons.
exactly.
What's the most famous thing one of them has done is slept with Scotty's wife.
Yep. So
Respectfully.
yeah, the logic is there. I see the vision. Even Thompson's dad was in the league. I forgot his name.
He went number one
Uh
overall, but
oh really? I didn't even know that.
he wasn't like a dog. I think he's best known for being like Kareem's backup.
Yeah, well, that's not saying a lot. I mean, it is saying a lot, but like, Kareem is
That's
Kareem, and
another one that kind of like
yeah,
gives rise to
100%.
the logic.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think the Magic overall, we'll talk about it later, but they're poised for a good season for sure. Bilal Koulibaly, I mean, is there anything to really say it? Because I feel like they're just going to throw him in the fire and I think really just kind of let him figure it out with the rookie year. But I don't really see him being like a supreme impact player in his first year. Right?
no, I,
Yeah.
I think the way we talked about the Pacers, and I totally agree with your sentiment about them just having a really great team. It's gonna be hard for him to carve out any sort of role. I think at this point.
Yeah. Him
Um,
him and the Wizards
and
is gonna be they're gonna be okay. But I think the guy
oh
that
yeah,
they were
okay, yeah,
got
right,
traded
right,
for, yeah. Jarris Walker,
right.
I think
I
has the
forgot.
opportunity to be like one of them ones for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm reading like the draft chart, and I didn't even read the right side. I totally
Yeah,
forgot he
all
was
good.
traded for Jarris Walker.
But yeah, Jarris Walker again,
Um,
I'm a big fan of his game and I think
dog.
it fits perfectly with like what Indiana needs because I think offensively you have your point guard, shooting guard, and three take care of that very well. Miles Turner obviously can stretch the floor. So I think what you really need is a guy who can lock down defensively, and Jarris Walker seems to be that guy for sure. Grabs a lot of rebounds, plays the game at a high motor, and man, him and Obi, that whole kind of thing, I can see it being like neither of them is really like the solidified starter because they're both that good, and that can only mean good things I think for the Pacers.
Yeah.
In honor of Ruben, though, let's talk about aside from his name, let's be real about Grady. How you feeling about him on this Raptors squad?
I think I feel like good about Grady Dick as a player, but I think the only thing is that I think he maybe went to the wrong team, like the wrong circumstance. And I think because of like, I don't think he's necessarily just a player that can shoot. Like obviously he's shown that he can be more than that, but I just think he would develop around like a team that has like a very substantial point guard at this point. Because I think if I'm not mistaken, he kind of falls into the 2-3 role. But um, you know, I think any backcourt, it's a two-man game in the back, and I don't know if like Dennis Schroeder is going to be a great player to help him develop, but I wouldn't say like Dennis Schroeder is the best player to have around
Yeah,
him.
like
Like
I
as
think if they don't have a guy who can really connect everyone, then it's not really going to
Yeah,
be super beneficial for sure.
yeah, like he's not going to get his proper shots. Like in a circumstance, even though the draft didn't fall this way, I would like to see him play around a player like Cade, for example. Even though they have Jaden Ivey, I think that's a player that could properly facilitate to him, and then you could grow a very solid 1-2 backcourt. But that's just an example off the top of my head. I'm not saying Cade's the best option, but a
Yeah,
player that can actually shift the ball to him and get him his shots properly. Dennis Schroeder's game is like, for the lack of a better word, it's kind of sloppy. It's good, and he gets his points, but like you seen him do that like little 360 move in like I think it was
yeah.
FIBA, like where he
Oh
just
my
tricked the center.
goodness.
Like
Yeah,
that's Dennis Schroeder's game, Like
yeah.
it's kind of like
It's
he's German Lance
perfect.
Stevenson.
It's perfect for his nickname, man, Dennis the Menace.
He
Anyways,
is, but
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
overall, this rookie class is looking. It's got a lot of upside. First of all, though, did you see the amount of glazing they're doing for Wemby for 2K?
yo, he's the highest rated rookie ever,
Yeah,
84 overall,
that's nutty. Like,
higher than
man,
LeBron, Zion.
they're setting up Wemby to be like the equivalent of. Do you know who Ryan Leaf is?
The name is very familiar. I think I need to rehash on the story.
So it's not exactly the same because Ryan Leaf went second, but I think if I'm not yeah. So him and Peyton Manning, when they were in the
Oh,
draft, it was kind of like who's one and who's two. And honestly, now that I'm like thinking of it, it doesn't fit at all. But I just think they're all setting up like it's almost like if Wemby doesn't average like 20, 10, and 3 blocks, he's like a failure for his rookie season. It's feeling like it's being set up that way.
well, yeah, he's gonna be 84 overall. That's
That's like
I can't even think.
a borderline all star.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of a player who probably falls into 84 overall. Like probably someone like Drew Holiday, for example, is probably close to
Yeah.
84 overall. And Drew Holiday's been in the league, and this dude's won like multiple awards. Like you got Victor Wembanyama, maybe Rookie of the Year at best, but like yeah, I don't really see it. Eight like
84
higher
is
rated than
major glazing for show.
yeah. Ronnie was smoking some dick on that one for sure.
100%. Insanely. Oh my goodness. Anyways, let's end off the pod with just some big questions and how we're feeling about them. Number one, is this the Bucks' last chance?
That's a great question. I want to say it's not their last chance, but I think it's their last chance for the next 2 seasons, 3 seasons. And I think it's because there's going to be a lot of movement. And I think in all respect to your team, I think there is like some aging concerns, like much like there is with Boston in some sense with like, well, not a ton of aging concerns, but, they're gonna eventually lose Al Horford. But much like that, I do think, Brook is aging into his own. I think, you're gonna see like decline slowly from, and I'm not gonna say declines per se, but Chris Middleton's gonna age into more of like I think a very solid role player. And I think they're gonna need, and Drew Holiday I think is still doing his own, but I think they just have players in their later 30s or like mid 30s, later 30s for the NBA that are going to need to I think they're going to need to retool in order for Giannis to still stay on top. So I think my answer is that I don't think they're gonna like decline heavily, but I don't think they're gonna be championship contenders maybe after the next 2 seasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, I'm in the same vein. I think
Mhm.
I think this year and next year is the last chance with this specific core.
Yes.
I think after
Yeah.
that, when you look at like the fact that they're saying Drew's gonna retire after this contract, Brooks like 37 or whatever it is. There's gonna be a lot of retooling, but I think whenever you have a guy like Giannis, you always have a chance, and I think it's all just dependent on how they retool for sure. All right,
Yeah. 100%.
what happens if the Celtics fall short again?
I don't even fucking know at this point. Because what do you even do with Jalen Brown's contract if you want to split up the two J's? Like, you have to like fetch like a shit ton for him at this point. And I don't know if any team has the assets to trade for a Jalen Brown, basically. Um, or at least I don't know how the cap would line up. Like, you'd have to make a blockbuster trade, and if Jalen Brown doesn't show up or if he does similar things, who's gonna want him? He might end up almost like being cemented on this team. I'm not saying that's a like the possibility, but I think there's no solution really if they tank it this year. I think they just run it back with the same squad and
Would you say
like
Missoula gets fired?
honestly, that's a tough call. Like I think he probably would get fired just in terms of like just how the league goes, but I wouldn't say he was going to end up being the problem. I don't think he's the problem.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm being honest, this is like me being completely candid. I wouldn't say he's the problem, but I think Jason Tatum needs to figure out like how he can like convert because he's definitely showed glimpses of it, but I think he's just really got to like will the team to win this year, um, and not like kind of like I think the problem is with having two very strong superstars on your team. Like one player has to kind of take over at some point, and I think the fact that they both sort of don't do that in game, it kind of becomes passive. And having someone like Kristaps is going to help that situation, but you can't have games where like you guys are just passing the ball. Like someone needs to turn up in the game. Like when Shaq and Kobe played together, there was clear games where either of them were the guy. But I think that's just how I see it. I think Jason Tatum just needs to grow his balls even more.
Damn, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Missoula would get fired just off of like the Celtics have to put it out to their
Yeah,
people that there's someone to blame or whatever it is.
he'd be the scapegoat for sure.
Yeah, he definitely be the scapegoat. And who knows, maybe that opens the realm for what's the name for Doc Rivers' return. Who knows?
Oh God.
But yeah, I like how you mentioned that. I think Jason Tatum's a guy who's almost in the vein of like how Giannis was before he got his chip, to where regular season, absolute monster. Leads the team to 60 wins, leads the team to 58 plus wins or whatever it is. But when it comes to the playoffs, still good, but takes a step back, and you never really want that from your number one guy. But
Yeah.
I think with him, it's almost like this is gonna sound really weird, but he's too good at multiple things, if that makes sense. I think it's
Yeah.
to the point where he spreads himself a little too thin. And I think he really just needs to focus on being like a scorer.
Yeah.
I think at times he
Yeah.
gets a
Like
little too passive, but yeah, I think for sure.
no, and yeah, to really round that off, I think it's just him like trying to be a facilitator in the playoffs, for example. Like, bro, just get your 30, get your 40. Like let like trust in your teammates a little more, I
That's
think.
that's
Like
kind of
to
tough
like
though, because looking at like the squad, he might be looked at to be a bit more like
yeah,
more of a passer. But we'll
that's
see.
not good.
Next question: is Embiid the next superstar to leave?
Like leave a team.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough. I want to say no. I,
Okay.
I only because I think they're gonna figure out a solution for him. And I also don't know where he would fit at this given point. Like I think it would take some time for that trade to happen. But I think there's going to be a mid-season trade of some sort of maybe if you're saying superstars like top 10, he could be. I don't know if any top 10 players are going to be moved in the next bit, but I think in terms of like players that are in that realm of top 20, top 30, I think a player will be moved in at some given point in the season. But yeah, I guess in your question, in your vein, I assume you're probably talking about like these really big guys. He probably is the next to go. I think everyone else is like there to stay on their team.
Hmm. Alrighty. Yeah, I feel like his decision is gonna, or his future is gonna hinge on whatever happens with this, like whether they make it work or they get something back. I think we're gonna see what's gonna happen in these next couple months. Alrighty, this
Mhm.
one's a nice one. What Eastern Conference team has the most upside? When you're looking at like these young teams, who would you say is like the roadmap is the most clear?
Are we talking about teams that are not like top six right now, you think?
I mean, if you
Or
want
top
to,
eight?
yeah, I'm thinking more like who's in the depths of the Eastern Conference right now that has like a way of becoming like rising to the top.
I'm not going to count Indiana here because I think like Tyrese's injury really held them back from being that team. So I'm really looking at Detroit, Charlotte, Orlando, and Washington. And I think I probably see Detroit being that team,
Okay,
even though they gotta figure out a lot. I think their young core is very promising. I think Orlando's is too, but I think they are probably gonna have to pawn off a ton of players before they figure it out. I
that's a
think
good point. Yeah,
like they are already going to be a good team, but there's like definitely like they got to get rid of three guards and figure out who's that guy. So I think there's a bit more time needed for that team. Detroit, I think, even though they're at the very bottom, I think they're going to at least maybe have the most upside in terms of like yeah, like seeing Jalen Duren, having Cade return, having a lot of like young promise in a lot of their other players. I'm not saying Orlando isn't that, but they already kind of know where they're at, and I think they're going to be like what OKC is like right now, almost. Uh, at
yeah,
least where I see them.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you got Detroit,
I got Detroit. I don't. Charlotte's I think in like poverty right now.
Charlotte. I think is, oh man, I like their young pieces, but it's a lot of meh.
I mean, Lamelo is really like the best, the best thing happening for that team, and that's not saying a lot at this given point.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think I'd pick the Magic because I like how you worded that there isn't a lot of like solidified spots, but I think we've seen with the Thunder, for example, to where that's not necessarily like the biggest problem or like the biggest like thing that'll hold a team back. But I don't know. I just look at the fact you have your de facto number one in Paulo, you have your Robin and Franz, and now whether it's Markel or Cole or Markel or Anthony Black, you're gonna have like your connector of everything, and I think you're gonna be able to get off of like for example, I can see Cole Anthony getting traded this season to get a bigger role, and them kind of using that to whether it's to accumulate picks to make a big splash trade or whatever it may be. I think the Magic are the structure's there for sure. I think
That's
even
fair.
if it's not like solidified, there's an avenue for them to get out of this like will they won't they kind of situation.
Yeah.
All right, last couple ones. This one's a fun one. Do you think Jordan Poole drops 50 this year?
Yes. Easy.
Who do you think it would be against? Just as like a fun like addition.
Definitely a team that's not good defensively. I'd say maybe like the Rockets. Everyone
Ooh.
drops a lot on the Rockets.
Oh, I think Jordan is gonna cook Lamelo. I think it'd be against
Oh
I
yeah,
think it'd be against Charlotte.
he could definitely cook Lamelo too.
Yeah. Oh man. Imagine if like you get that right on like the betting or whatever it is. But yeah, I can see him dropping a cool 50. And then
He
last
might do it
question.
twice.
Damn near does he get 60? Or based on how often people were scoring last year, does he drop fucking 70? Anyways,
Okay, I don't know about that.
70 is definitely like I don't know about that. But I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie, I could see him getting really hot one day and just cause like maybe it's a game where Kyle Kuzma or Tyus Jones is resting and he just like puts everything up.
yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie, if they play the Warriors this year, they might hold him to like a donut or like something like really really low.
No, I can see that too.
All right, last question. What does a successful season for the Magic Hornets or Magic Hornets and Pistons look like in your opinion? You know, three of like the youngest
Successful
cores in the
season.
league. All three kind of have like their guy in a sense, but it's all about building out from that.
Okay, well, I'll keep it short. Or, well, not keep it short, but I'll give a brief answer for every team. I think for the Detroit Pistons, I think it's more about figuring out, I think the structure and the sort of, yeah, the culture of the team. I think you're going to have Cade returning, and you're going to have a lot of question marks on how each player fits around him. Because I still think at this point, there's no one that's the number one consensus guy on that team. So I think they really need to figure out, who is our starting five and who are we going with going moving forward? Because even in that center position, like we talked about, who's really the best? I mean, it is Jalen Duren, but I think knowing how the Detroit Pistons operate, they're going to give like all three of them equal burn, and it's going to be like slow development. And I think they really need to hone in on like who are your like core guys like going forward. Um, for Charlotte, honestly, I think it's like it's it's kind of tough. I think it's about them kind of trying to maybe do the same thing, but really progress into like being, a more serviceable team than a bottom three. Because I think like if I'm not mistaken, when they had, the Miles Bridges LaMelo Ball show going on, they were scratching the playoffs, weren't they?
They were
Or
a
like
play-in team for those two
they were
years,
a
yeah,
playing team,
when
yeah.
Melo entered.
So and not enough has changed for them to warrant being a bottom three team. Even though Miles Bridges is obviously left, if he is set to return, and obviously he's gonna be mad rusty, like they have the upside at least in terms of talent to be there. So I think it's about like again establishing a squad, but more so like getting back to form. In Orlando, I think it's about downsizing and like kind of how you mentioned, like
Mm.
pooling together assets to maybe make a big splash, big trade. I think, yeah, you do have your like, I would say 3 through 5 almost covered. I think Wendell is a very serviceable center, and he's not the one that needs to be replaced. But you do need to figure out that backcourt, I think, in order to like progress to the next step. So I think they got to make a decision. I think after this year, hopefully by the midpoint this next year, on who's really going to be in that backcourt. I don't think they can keep playing with Markel Cole and then now adding Anthony Black, having Jalen Suggs. There's just too much untapped talent to not turn that into something.
Mm. I liked all your points. Yeah, for me, just approach from a different angle. I think for the Magic, I would like to see a play-in push. I think you're at
Yeah,
the point where getting a top pick isn't necessarily going to do you as much good as it would if you have no roadmap. But because you
yeah,
have a lot of these solidified pieces, there's a lot of value in playing high pressure basketball. We saw this year where they definitely made like a play and push for like the 10th or ninth seed. Fell a little short, but I would definitely love to see them in a play in this year. Same thing with the Pistons. They're I think just a little less likely just because it's Cade coming off of injury and just figuring out like how they're gonna play. And when it comes to Monty Williams' style of ball, I think it's definitely the kind where it takes a year to adjust, or you need mature guys to really run it effectively. And the fact that most of their guys are like 23, 24, they're definitely maybe a year or two away from being in the place of something like the Magic, but they're definitely closer than say the Hornets. I think a successful season for the Hornets is like winning more than 20 games.
yeah,
Being able to stay afloat or whatever. But yeah, we'll see.
yeah.
Regardless, that has been another episode of the Blacktop Podcast. You got any last things to say?
Um, no, I don't.
All good. Ruben, hope you're feeling better, bro. The rest of y'all, stay safe, stay blessed. We'll see y'all soon.
See ya.
Uh.